good to see everyone. Appreciate you being here to study the Word of God with us. Please turn to the book of Isaiah. In this lesson, we want to talk about the works of God's servants. Now remember last time we told you the three servants that are mentioned in Isaiah. This will be on your final, Lindsay. You must know. Who? Does anybody remember the three servants? Cyrus. God used Cyrus to do what? To return the Jews from captivity. Who was the next one? Israel. They were to show the glory of God to the whole world, in contrast to idolatry and false religion. False religion and idolatry has always been a part of our world. And Israel was to show to the world true religion. Unfortunately, they didn't live it themselves. So if you don't live it yourself, how are you going to show it to anybody else? Bryce, who was the next servant? Don't let Donna tell you. The Messiah. So that's the three servants we have. Now, the servant section. There's a section in Isaiah devoted to these three servants. Chapters 40 through 53. That's your servant sections. It gives you the nature of the servants. It tells you what God expected of them. It tells you what they were to do for God. Now think about being a servant for God. All of this looks forward to the New Testament, because we are to be servants of God, right? Every Christian is to be a servant of God. In fact, Romans 6:17, God be thanked, you were servants of sin, but you have obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine which was delivered to you, being then made free from sin, you became the servants of righteousness. So all Christians are to be servants. Can anybody tell me what happened in John 13? Has to do with the custom of the day. The roads were open. Yes. The roads were open. The sandals were open. And you can imagine how your feet get. Man, mine get pretty bad with closed up. But imagine walking, and they didn't have cars. Most of them walked everywhere or rode some filthy animal somewhere, and their feet would get terribly dirty. So when you went into someone's home, I come to visit Corey in this day and time. The first thing Corey is supposed to do is to have a servant come and do what? Wash my feet. Now that sounds kind of weird to us. But you think our customs don't sound weird to other nations? One day in preacher school, we had a guy from Afghanistan, and I was sitting by him during chapel, and my nose started to run, and I took out this little deal and went like that. And he said to me, "You are going to wipe that on that rag, put it in your pocket, and carry it around all day?" He said, "I don't know if I can stay in this country for 2 years." I said, "I'll try to do better." So I didn't do it when he was around. I just let it run everywhere. So customs are different. Most people, except in the 60s, they tried it for a while. Most people don't wear open sandals, and our roads are paved, they're not dusty. But back then, the roads were dusty, the sandals were open, and it was a needful thing, a needful custom. And in John 13, they're meeting together for the last Passover supper. And which one of those wonderful disciples said, "I'll take care of the foot washing"? Had to be done. Which one of them said it? Not near a one. Not one of them. Not one of them even mentioned it. You know when you don't want to do something? Like when I want Corey to do something and she don't want to do it, she just don't mention it. And when I say it, she doesn't hear it. They didn't mention it. Not a word. So Jesus comes in and begins to wash their feet. Now think of this. He created the heavens and the earth. He is the Lord of the universe. He gets down on His knees and performs the work of a slave. Now, can you imagine what the devil was thinking as he watched this? That's the Son of God? Washing people's feet? In Matthew 20, the disciples did not understand the nature of the kingdom. They thought it was going to be a physical kingdom like Solomon had. Wipe out your enemies. And so James and John and their dear mother got together and said, we need to ask Jesus, when He comes in His kingdom, if we can have places of power. One of us sit on the right hand and one of us sit on the left hand. So the mother says, well, I'll go and ask Him. So she goes and asks Jesus. He said, what is it you want? He knew what she wanted. She said, for one of my sons to sit on your right and one to sit on your left, that's places of authority and power over men. When you come in your kingdom. You know what Jesus said? You don't even know what you're asking. She didn't even understand the nature of God's kingdom. And I want you to look at the lesson that He taught in Matthew chapter 20 and begin, let's start and say 25. That ought to get it. Matthew 20 and 25. Notice what Jesus said to them. He said to them. And you can imagine it got pretty quiet. You shall drink indeed of the cup and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with, but to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give, but it shall be given for whom it is prepared of my Father. And when they heard it, they were moved with indignation. Yes. Matthew chapter 20 and verse 24. 4. Matthew 20, 24. When they heard what these two guys were doing, they said, oh, we understand. You just want to have a place of power. You want to get to tell people what to do. Is that what it says? When they heard about it, they were moved with indignation. What's that mean? You ever seen Christy mad? You ever seen her really mad? Larry will tell you it's something you had rather not observe. These people are filled with anger. Why are they mad? They wanted power. They wanted to get to tell people what to do. And here James and John and their sweet little mother, Tracy, got in on this deal to ask first. So they're all mad. So it wasn't just the 12. Then look at Matthew 20, verse number 25. And Jesus called unto them and said, you know that the princes of the Gentiles, now that's the people of the world, people in authority in the world. You know that the princes of the Gentiles exercise dominion over them, and they that are great exercise authority upon him. Jesus said, now look, that's the way it is in the world. And you all know that. You live down here. You know that's the way things operate. You know that's the way things go. President Biden and Prime Minister Xi met today. I don't want to know what was said. I don't want to know if the United States backed down. I don't want to know, because I already know. He says, now in the world, that's the way it is. People have dominion over each other, and they exercise that authority over each other. But look at verse 26. It shall not be so among you, but whosoever will be great, that's what they wanted, was to be great. Whosoever will be great among you, let him be your minister. Now, a minister doesn't mean a sweet little preacher. That's not what it means in the Bible. The word minister comes from the original language that simply means servant. So what did Jesus say to them? Whosoever will be great among you, let him be your servant. And whosoever will be chief among you, let him be your servant. Then he gives the greatest example that's ever been given on this earth. Verse 28. Even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life as a ransom for many. He came not to be served, he came to serve. He is the example. Here he is, right here in John 13. And what has religion done with it? What's religion done with John 13? They've ruined it, just like every other verse in the Bible. They have made it a church ordinance. It's not a church ordinance. They have made it a church ordinance like the Lord's Supper. It's not a church ordinance. Jesus said, I have given you an example. Example that you should do as. Do you remember in the 3rd grade? Oh, I hated that grade, didn't you? Wasn't that the most boring? Somebody liked it? Yeah, that would make it different. Well, in the 3rd grade, we learned as is a figure of speech. Do as I have done unto you. Do like I have done unto you. Serve each other. Help each other. Pull each other out of the mire. Don't let them drown in that stuff. Pull them out. Serve your fellow man. And Jesus not only talked about it, He did it. And He gave His whole life in service to you and to me, for the whole world to see. This is what a servant is. Matthew 23:11. He that is greatest among you. You want to be great? Well, most people do. Most people wouldn't say, well, I just want to be nothing. Most people say, I want to make something out of my life. You want to be great? He that would be great among you, let him be your servant. The greatest servant is the greatest of all. Jesus. And He says this is what we must do. So all of these works of God's servants that you're studying through 40 through 53, all of that points forward to us. That's what the church is. We serve each other. We help each other. 1 Corinthians 12:26. If one member suffer, we all suffer with it. If one member is honored, we all rejoice with it. Service. First, Matthew 6:33, our service first must go to who? God. And when it comes down where a choice must be made between you and God, if I'm worth anything in the kingdom, who am I going to choose? Well, what if you lose your job? Doesn't that make you want to vomit? What if you lose your job? We must first serve God, Matthew 6:33. Seek first the kingdom of heaven and His righteousness, and all these other things will be added to you. So first we seek God, then first we serve God, then we serve our fellow man. And it doesn't matter. He doesn't have to be a Christian. We serve our fellow man, whoever they are. Now that's hard to do. Nowadays, let me tell you, the other day I walked up and a lady had a big bag of groceries and I could see she couldn't get it in there. So I walked up and helped her get it in her car. And you know what she said to me? "Why, you're a sweet, lovely young man." Not hardly. If I'd have wanted your help, I'd have asked for it. I said, "Well, ma'am, I saw you were having trouble." "Well, if I was having trouble, do you think I'd want somebody to come help me that can't even walk over here?" I said, "Well, sorry about that. Did the best I could." So sometimes it's hard to serve people because we live in such a suspicious society. And boy, if you have Democrat or Republican or what's the other one? Independent, or if you have Biden or Trump written on there, you got to really be careful. You go to help somebody, that might be the last person that you're going to help. But that's what we're here for, is to serve God and other people. And God has these servants. All right, what are they going to do? Well, first, let's look at Cyrus. Let me see the chapter. Cyrus, if I can find it in my unreadable notes. Linda, did you write this? 45 is Cyrus, chapter 45. All right, you can read that chapter, and the whole thing it's saying, he's going to be God's servant, and how is he going to serve God? The Jews are in captivity, been there for 70 long years. Cyrus is going to let them go home, and he's going to fund it. Was it 1948 when the Jewish people moved back to their home state of Jerusalem? Who do you think funded that? Good old U.S. of A. That's why all the Arabs hate us. We were trying to do a good thing. They should have a homeland, we thought. So we funded that, and look what's happened since then. Look what's happening today. So a lot of times when you serve somebody, don't expect thank you. Because sometimes you're going to get something ugly. But you still did what God said, right? You still did what the Lord wanted you to do. I think the Lord wanted me to help with those groceries. Now, I didn't tell you all she said. Part of it was English and part of it was Spanish. But what she didn't know, I know every cuss word in Spanish. Because I was brought up in a community of 80% Spanish. And so that's the first thing I learned. I learned that before I learned the colors. First I learned the cuss words, then I learned the colors, then I learned how to count. I knew every word she said. And I just said, I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm just trying to be of help. But you do what you can. You help people any way you can. Cyrus was a special individual. He rebuilt the temple. Now here what was hard for me to understand, if I can find it. Do you know what Cyrus is called? The man of the East. But then in another lesson, he's called, somebody's called, 45:25, Cyrus is called the man of the East. But in 41:2, one servant of God is called the servant from the north. Well, now I tell you what, I'm really not real good on directions. But I got an idea of what north is and east is. And I know they're not the same. So why do we have a man from the east and a man from the north? Well, if you do a little studying on it, you'll find out that Cyrus was from the east of Babylon. So he's from a man from the east. But he conquered the Medes. And after conquering the Medes, he conquered Persia and formed the Medo-Persian Empire, and it was to the north. So he's the man from the east, and he's the man from the north. But the first time I read this, I thought he was from the east. He was. He's from the north too. Let me see if I can find it. 41:25 and 41:2. He's called the man from the east, and he's called the man from the north. But it doesn't give his name in both places, so I wondered, well, who's the guy from the north? When Cyrus conquered and the Medes and the Persians became united as an army, then they became the greatest army in the world. And were just sweeping over everything. I mean, they were it. And Cyrus was the one. And then Cyrus writes this proclamation. You can find it in Ezra chapter 1, verse 1 and following, where he says, I'm going to let the Jews go home and rebuild their temple, and I'm going to finance it. So, he was God's servant. The next servant is the Messiah. Now you can read about him in chapter 42, 1 and following. And we went over that last time, so we won't go over it again. Now who's the third servant? Israel is called the servant of God. Now you see where somebody is reading real fast and they see Israel, the servant of God, and then they think Israel is the servant of God all the way through here, and you actually have three servants of God. So you got to read carefully. Now, what's Israel to do? Glorify God, bring true religion to a world of idolatry. Now, what you have in chapter 1, God said, let's go to court. A lot of court scenes in the prophets. They're metaphorical. They're not like Donald Trump is having. He's going to a real court. These are metaphorical. And it's showing how foolish it is for a man to chop down a tree. Part of that tree he uses to warm himself. Part of that tree he uses to cook his supper. And part of that tree he fashions in the form of a man and falls down and worships it. And God sarcastically says the same tree that you used to eat and to warm yourself, you're falling down and worshiping the same tree? Something that cannot speak, something that cannot hear. So he utterly destroys the false religion of the day. Now, we're told today you should never say anything ugly about any religion. Will you read chapter 41? God said some pretty strong things about idolatry and how foolish it was. Should we follow God? Should we do what God did? I've always thought that's the reason I became a Christian. And that's what God did, was show the folly of false religion to all the world. That's what the church is supposed to be doing, is showing true religion contrasted with false religion, and show what God wants us to do. Now, there was another thing I wanted to bring out here, if I can find it. In chapter 43, he goes back and renews all these promises to Israel that he is going to bring them home, and in 8 through 13, no one's going to stop it. In chapter 44, Israel is restored, and he shows again the folly of idolatry. Now remember, they hadn't even been captured yet. This is 100 years before they're captured. This is prophecy. He's showing, here's what's going to happen. You're going to be captured. I'm going to restore you and bring you back home. That's in 44, 1 through 8. And the folly of false religion is 44, 9 through 20. Should we follow what God did? 45 is Cyrus, God's servant. 46 is the prediction that Babylon would fall, because Babylon's going to take them into captivity. And you have two names here. The first one in chapter 46 is what? B-E-L. Now, that is the main god of Babylon. So in chapter 46, God says, this is going to fall. This false religion, it's going to fall. And then you have another one mentioned in chapter 46. Let me see, how do you spell it? M-E-B-O? Okay, do you know who Nebo is? It's not somebody from Star Trek. Sounds like it. That's the son of Baal. And that is in Greek the god Mercury. God shows these are going to fall. Then in 47, in chapter 47, he says, Babylon is going to fall. We'll start here next time with chapter 48. Thank you.